Yeah, I can actually hear myself now too. Okay, great. That was a lovely introduction. A recovering academic, it sounds very good. My life has been a mix of everything, so I've been in all sorts of domains. When I first graduated from UCD in Dublin, many years ago, I did chemistry and biochemistry as my main degree. And then I went off working. Ireland in the 90s was a very hard place to be. Very few jobs, and most people immigrated. In fact, our university was called the airport. It was that bad. Everybody was heading straight out of the country. I was very lucky to secure a job, but it was every 6 months the contract was or was not renewed, as the case may be. So it was a hard time. And after 2 years of working in Ireland, I then moved to Scotland. I worked for what's now called the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency. But while there, I also did a master's. And to make my life complicated, I did it in Wales, so it meant frequent trips from Scotland all the way down to Wales to do that. And then I went back working, and then eventually I found a place where I thought, oh, this is great, I love this environment, research is fantastic, I do want to do more research, and I want to do a PhD. So I went off and I did a PhD in Portugal, in the Instituto Superior Técnico in Lisbon in Portugal, and it was in physical chemistry. It was on buckyballs, basically carbon-60, carbon-70 compounds, looking at the photophysics and photochemistry of those. And that was wonderful, but then reality bites, and you have to find a job somewhere at some particular point in time. And my mother wanted me back in Ireland. So there was a big, strong pull back to Ireland. And so I started a job in Ireland with an American multinational. So that's kind of my kind of life. And, you know, later you get married, you have kids, and you have to move around and all the rest, because both of you, if you're both in the academic area or in research, you move around a lot. And it's very rare to find you both in the same location at the same time. So, you know, lots of different changes and things. And the one thing I think you can be guaranteed in research life is that it's going to be insecure, is the one way I would put it. You're always depending on some kind of funds to come in. You know, you've got certain numbers of contracts to fulfill and that, and so you're always chasing funds. And actually, strangely, it's the same when you become an entrepreneur. So it seems to be a very familiar environment for me. Okay, I'll get into the talk. So finding purpose in this urgent age of climate change. So finding your purpose. Later in the talk, you'll understand where I was coming from when I came up with this part. It's an urgent age, it's climate change, and we do need to make decisions faster. We're in the decade where things really need to change, and we need to make a lot of decisions quickly. And AI can help us speed up those decisions, but it all depends on the quality of the data sets. So data from Nicholas earlier, responsibility as well from, I'm so sorry, Anamika, all resonate really strongly with me. Okay, so the urgent age of climate change. So I went to see a TED Talk with Professor Johan Rockström at the Climate Resilience Center in Sweden. And, you know, the picture does not look good. You know, I think we all know this. You know, and it's increasing, and it's even, you know, it's another inflection point again. And we've really got to get it coming back down. Okay, so how are we going to come and get it back down is the big thing. You know, that's where we're at. It needs to come down. I've included here at the bottom, actually, the TED Talk itself for anybody who is interested. It's so much more articulate than I can be, obviously, an expert in his field. But, you know, this is what we're like in terms of our consumption, in terms of our carbon budget. And when we look to this year, I think it was in August, when we hit the budget of what's within our planetary boundaries. Now we're living on a borrowed budget at this moment in time, so we do need to make changes. The professor goes on and he talks about, you know, this being the decisive decade, and we need to move fast. And when I think of AI, I think, yeah, AI is capable of helping us make those decisions and make it fast, but we need to make sure that they are the right decisions as well, and based on responsible, quality-checked data and data sets. And so, when you go through these things and you think, oh, what can I do? What is it I personally can do? And through my research life, I have come across different topics and different subjects and things where I felt that, yeah, I could do something. I looked back over my career and I thought, is there something where now from knowledge and understanding I can translate that into action? And so action meant for me forming a company. When you form a company, you're looking to a longevity. So you can act, and there's a longevity there. Something I didn't experience, for instance, in my research life. In my research life, it was going from one research topic to another grant, to a different group, this type of thing. But now I am hopefully rooted in Conry innovation and acting for change. So I looked to sustainable food systems, and I thought that this would be a good way for me to begin the change that's necessary. So the why of Conry. So my own background, I spoke about it, chemistry, biochemistry, physical chemistry. And in the last 15 years, I've been based in the marine sector. So I worked for 7 years on something called marine biodiscovery, and I think you know it really well here in Norway, marine bioprospecting it's called in Norway. So looking at the ocean, looking at the organisms in the ocean and trying to create drugs or new novel materials from these. So that was part of my background. Another part of my background was on the Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance between Canada, the EU and the US. So I was lucky to be a director of that program. And this is where trust, you all spoke about trust earlier and how that evolved. So this was trying to get Canadian scientists, US scientists and European scientists to trust each other and to open up their data sets so that we could do the big picture science that's needed for change. So the Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance is something that really opened my eyes to where we are at this moment in time and heading for dire problems if we don't change. Some of the programs that I was involved in, I became the chair of the Atlantic Marine Microbiome and was the EU co-chair for this, and we brought out a wonderful roadmap, and I'd encourage you all to go there and have a look at that, marinemicrobiome.org, to have a look at that roadmap. We produced 5 roadmaps across seabed mapping, marine microbiome, the ecosystem approach to ocean health and stressors, ocean observation, and ocean literacy. So those were the kind of 5 topic areas. I was also asked to create a youth ambassador program where we would invite youth ambassadors, or young people in science in particular, from all of the different regions in Canada, in the EU and the US, and create a program for them so that they could reach out amongst their peers and fellows. And, you know, they're incredibly social media savvy, something a 50-year-old would know nothing really about. But these people are just incredible, you know, and they can create a community and get things done a hell of a lot faster than a 50-year-old could do. And then also one of the campaigns that I created was a Go Atlantic Blue campaign, which was meant to go across the world, but in fact, unfortunately landed in 2019 when the world then shut down in 2020. So it didn't go across the world, go Pacific Blue or go Mediterranean Blue or whatever. But it was to connect all of our Atlantic stories and connect our science stories, connect our our fishing stories, connect our books and connecting ourselves back to the ocean, because we seem to have forgotten that the ocean is 70% really of the world, and you know anything that affects the ocean really ultimately affects us, and we are unfortunately having huge impacts on that ocean, negative impacts on that ocean. So life with purpose. It started with me looking in 2020 when COVID hit and not having a lot to do at that particular time, and everybody wondering, how are we going to cope with this? You know, COVID came from, if you like, our interference in the biodiverse world. And so I started to look at this thing called ikigai, a Japanese expression of life with purpose and trying to find my purpose. So what do I love? And what does the world need became my mission. What does the world need and what can I be paid for so I don't actually have to depend on grants anymore, perhaps, became my vocation. And then what can you be paid for and what are you good at? Comes to be your profession. And finally, what are you good at and what you love is passion. And all of that integrating together to create your life with purpose. And so that's part of, well, that is the reason why I started up the company. And you'll see this is our Conrae's logo. So it's all there. And all of the fish are joining together for our life with purpose, basically. So the purpose of our company is to make change. It's to help that change happen. I also incorporated, as an Irish person, we were always very proud to talk about Ireland. So I also incorporated a little bit of St. Bridget. So St. Bridget was a patron saint of Ireland, almost forgotten saint of Ireland, but when I was a young person, everybody spoke about St. Bridget. Very strong woman, in many miracles attributed to her in terms of healing, but also in terms of feeding people. So it's giving an idea of what is our purpose at the end of the day. And the fish, of course, red fish and white fish. So red fish are salmon and trout, and the white fish are in this instance blue because it didn't quite work with the logo, are all of the other fish species. So in terms of, well, I think we all know what the global challenges are, climate change, resource efficiency, the human population becoming 10 billion by 2050. When I look back at Ireland, when I was born, there was almost 3.5 million people in Ireland in that time, in the late 1960s, early 70s. It was similar actually here in Norway, more or less the same kind of population. And now we are about 5.3 million people now, and I think it's 5.4 million or 5.45 in Norway. So, populations are increasing, and we need to feed that population. Okay, but yet we've exploited our resources, we've maxed out resources on land, and we do need to look elsewhere, and we, of course, will look to the sea. But we're also an aging population, and we all have health concerns as well. So when I started to look at salmon, actually, and these stats here are from the Global Salmon Alliance, and I saw that salmon had 10 times less the 5 times less the carbon footprint of beef, about 5 times less that of pork, and 1.5 times less that of chicken. I went, oh my God, if we want to feed the world, okay, we have to have more low carbon footprint animal protein, like salmon, like fish. So in a sense, Conrae was founded to help and enable that food production to a lower carbon footprint protein. So then I started to look at, well, what possibly could stop this from happening? And one of those things was sea lice. So our company is there to reliably manage and control sea lice in salmon aquaculture and in a sustainable way. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So in global Atlantic salmon aquaculture, it's a cold fish water species. I've included these slides because last night it came to my attention that maybe not everybody here in the audience is an aquaculture base, and so I thought I would include some slides on this just to show you what it's like at least for salmon. So it's a cold water species. In Ireland, we produce 0.1% of global salmon. Yet we're the same kind of population as Norway. We have nice water resources, but yet 0.1%. And salmon is very almost synonymous with Ireland as well. We all talk about the Brodán Fasa, and Brodán Fasa is Brodán is salmon, and Fasa means knowledge, the salmon of knowledge, and it goes down through our legends where you touch the salmon and you get knowledge from it. So it's very intimately associated with us, but let's see what it's like in Norway. So Norway produces over 50% of global salmon. It's amazing, it's fantastic, and kudos to Norway, that is a massive achievement, Okay, so I go on. Sea lice is a problem, of course. It's not quite showing up here, but it's in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, it's the cold water regions for salmon production. But of course, we have warming waters. Things are getting more difficult. Pests are becoming more pronounced, and more and more generations of them in the same time period. and they're growing more rapidly. And of course, if waters are warming, then pest species from other latitudes are now going to go moving north. So there are pests that we also need to be aware of that's going to happen. But of course, it's not just about salmon. So, there's freshwater and there's marine freshwater species. And here from the Aquaculture 24, I nicked one of their images there just to show the kind of aquaculture species that are around. And looking at the FAO reports, in 2020, it was 135 billion worth of low carbon fish protein. And about 15% of that is marine and 85% is inland. So Conry hopefully will move from salmon eventually and migrate to the other species. However, the sea lice problem is very pronounced in salmon aquaculture. So conquer that first. So when I look to salmon aquaculture, I think it's a bit like the gladiator. Normally this type of thing is used for startups. Startups are out there and they're fighting, they're trying to get money, they're trying to move their technology on and all the rest. But the more and the more you think about it, the more I think the salmon aquaculture is a bit like this. And it's like daring greatly. If anybody's interested, it's Theodore Roosevelt's I suppose a bit of prose there on that, about being in the arena, daring greatly, and yet all of these people are shouting at you for this, that, or the other, move here, move there, oh, you should have done that, Nobody knows until you're in that situation. And you're the person there, and you're the one that's fighting, and it's for your life. So I think aquaculture could be described in a similar way. There's a lot of misinformation out there about aquaculture, and it has the most incredible story to tell, really. So I call it, I call this our heroes, that particular slide, because aquaculture are our heroes. So this is aquaculture in Ireland, and what I call daring greatly. In Ireland, it's very high Atlantic energy that's there. We don't really have all that many sheltered spots for it, and invariably those sheltered spots seem to coincide with areas of special conservation. They're beautiful looking places, but very rural, and nobody really lives there at the same time. I've included a slide on Iceland, especially for Björgólfur there. Again, it's really quite rough, rough conditions and everything. And then you see Norway, and I deliberately included this particular slide here because it looks so sheltered, so calm, and I'm sure you have storms as well. But this is one of the reasons why Norway is so good at aquaculture, because you have incredibly sheltered, deep fjords and wonderful natural resources. Some more of the challenges. When you do culture at sea, it's out there. You're exposed to the elements, but you're also exposed to all of that wonderful biodiversity that's out there as well. So, you'll have seagulls, you'll have birds coming down, eagles, that type of thing, trying to take the salmon out of the pen. Now, of course, they do have bird nets and shelter nets to prevent that from happening, but it still, on occasion, happens. This picture here is from 2023, but I know that there was another one most recently as well during the summer of a very large, I think it was 345 kilo bluefin tuna that suddenly somehow managed to get itself into the net. And of course, you're talking there about the dangers of the net being torn and all of your salmon escaping as well. Not only nicely eaten by the bluefin tuna. In other countries, not so much here in Norway, I believe, but you can also have seals and others like walruses or whatever, I guess, coming down and having a nice snack as well. But when they do that, they also tend to harm the net, and you can have an escape. And of course, there are deterrents, and things that the salmon producers do put in place to prevent all of that from happening, but still things do happen. Wild shoals as well is a big one actually in Ireland. I'm not so sure about Norway, but wild shoals of fish coming into the bay and spreading the lice that's on those fish. It could be a wild shoal of trout, for instance, or it could be a wild shoal of pollock or mackerel, but equally they're also infected with different types of parasites that can then come off the fish and go on to the salmon. So out of nowhere, literally, you can have an infestation overnight that you have to cope with. So it's very, very difficult. Plankton blooms, this picture, nice picture of Ireland there, but with that kind of bluey green plankton bloom coming along. Plankton blooms tend not to be so dangerous except at night time. If they come into a fjord, they can suck out all of the oxygen out of the water and you can have a massive fish kill overnight. I included one here for Norway as well, just so that to appeal to the audience. And of course, also you can get viruses, bacteria and amoeba all in the water. And, if circumstances are right, they can all get hold and bring disease onto the salmon. Here's just a couple of different and some beautiful ones here as well from Norway, from the Institute of Marine Research. So the first two here on closest to me would be microalgae. So they come in and they irritate the gills of the fish, and when they do that, obviously they can kill some of the cells on the gills of the fish, and that's really when I suppose other infections take root, and one of those would be amoebic gill disease, very high in Ireland, amoebic gill disease along with sea lice as well. And then you have these other types of large. These are large. You can see these, no problem at all. So they come in and they'll sting the fish. The fish will have lesions afterwards, and again, secondary bacterial infections. This one here is quite innocent, but again, if you get a bloom of those, it can suck all of the oxygen out of the water, and you'll get large fish kills. And then most recently, we're seeing these kind of barbed wire jellies, which are about 30 meters long. So when they come in, they can sting a lot of fish very, very quickly, and consequently higher mortalities as a result. So I'll come on to sea lice. This is a wonderful picture from Lars Hamre in the Institute for Marine Research in the University of Bergen. And there's over 500 different species of sea lice, and they're natural. None of these are unnatural. They're all found naturally in the environment. But when you do aquaculture, as indeed if you do any kind of farming, when you get a lot of even people in one room, you can imagine how COVID would spread in here. It's similar with these kind of pests. They spread rapidly in an environment where you're in close proximity. So there's cod lice, there's salmon lice, and there's what I like to call this one the opportunistic lice, Caligus elongatus, because it will, hop onto anything basically for a nice meal and come back out again. In salmon aquaculture, it's the Lepiopterus salmonus is the one that is the most feared and persistent pest. It's found all over the northern hemisphere, in particular, I suppose from Canada all the way across to Norway and down. And then there's another strain of it actually in the Pacific side of the north as well. So this one is the most stressful actually on the fish itself. Okay, so the kind of deep tech side and AI and aquaculture piece. So I wanted to do, I suppose, for me, the companies that are most familiar for me when it comes to deep tech and AI. So Cathix Ocean is, I think, one of the world's leading subsea measurement, imaging and measurement company. X-Ocean, these are two Irish companies, so they're very familiar to me. X-Ocean is a company where they do remote surveys, basically a survey using an autonomous vessel, very small one, so you don't have to crew a very large vessel. So anybody who's been on any of those kind of expeditions at sea will know that, well, in Ireland it would cost maybe for 3.5 weeks to 4 weeks, maybe 600,000 to 700,000 euro for that expedition. So it's really, really expensive. These guys do it with an autonomous vessel instead, so it's a lot cheaper. So great, unique selling point there for them. And of course, Kongsberg. Kongsberg is world famous. And I'm sure Kongsberg technology is in a lot of different types of things at sea. Some smaller imaging side of things, there's Blue Line Labs in Canada and OTAC as well, looking at plankton and trying to identify plankton species using AI or training, or, they're using machine vision in learning and AI development. NTNU, anybody here, you'll be very familiar with the e-loom over there, influenced by eels or snakes originally, I believe, for manipulations at sea underwater. Wattbots and Remora Robotics and EasyX are all about cleaning nets or cleaning the inside of land-based salmon aquaculture or trout aquaculture, whatever it may be. So again, cleaning something on a net is hard, and interpreting what's on that net and cleaning that net and inspecting it to make sure that there's no tears on that net all require some form of AI as well at the end of the day. In terms of biotechnology and non-lethal diagnosis, there's Wellfish Tech, and some of these will be members of the Seafood Innovation Cluster as well in Bergen. And of course, AquaCloud, and I know that Björgólfur will be talking about that later as well. AquaCloud and getting people to agree to share their data and the use of that data, and what can come out of that should be incredible insights. In terms of lice counting and fish health and welfare, here I've just included the companies that are using kind of more AI approach to it. So Stingray Marine Solutions, a fantastic Norwegian company that uses lasers to target lice on the fish and kill the lice on the fish. Optiscale that does again counts the lice on the fish, and Aquabite as well. Very similar. A lot of competition in that space as well. But again, they all use these enormous data sets that they've built up in terms of machine vision, machine learning, and AI to count. And of course, it's a regulatory thing that sea lice must be counted on the fish and kept below a certain number. So when I started thinking about potential applications for deep tech and AI, I put up this kind of list here, when it comes to the natural world and marine protected areas. Sorry, I can't read that over there, so I'm going to have to read it here. I immediately thought about, mapping surveys. So that's something that has been really good in Ireland. The Marine Institute was tasked, along with the Geological Survey Ireland, of mapping Ireland's exclusive economic zone, and they've done a great job, and they will be finished that in 2026. So they'll have mapped all of that, but then the mapping forms the very basis upon which everything else is really. So, where's the biodiversity in that? Looking at things like eDNA, trying to find out, what was in this area most recently. If you're looking at marine protected areas, then you might be looking at for infringements, in that, another potential application for AI. Of course, the whole acoustic tags, underwater cameras, tools for eDNA, all of that doing, I suppose, broad scale, and very heavy from an infrastructure perspective, the capital items to pay for all of that, but also critically the operational cost to maintain that side of things too. That's more for conversations with some other people later. But you need specific data sets, but you also need broad data sets as well. Looking at the wild fish stocks, and in terms of aquaculture, the timings of the wild stock migrations and whether they're in the fjord, and can I expect that my salmon will be infected soon? Can I deploy lice skirts? What can I do maybe to avoid all of that? I think AI can be incredibly useful for that, and of course ecosystems assessments. And all of these things here when it comes to aquaculture in terms of diseases, parasites, even the feed, the deep tech for the feed in terms of culturing microalgae. My brother did microbiology and I did chemistry, so my reactions, were absolutely maximum 24 hours, and I would have, a good result. If I didn't, I could start over again. He did microbiology, to have a fantastic culture growing. Everything was wonderful. 3 months into it, suddenly they all died. And he was like, what? Why did they all die? He had no knowledge really as to why they died. So when you're looking at feed and replacing soya and replacing other things with things that can be cultured, like microalgae, there's a lot more needs to go into that in terms of the AI side of things and understanding with a lot of sensors what's happening and culturing that way. Warmer water means different species, so can we use deep tech AI to predict what we're going to get? you know. And then RAS, recirculating aquaculture systems, is incredibly complex, really incredibly complex. And I don't think anybody really, maybe apart from Proximar this year, in Japan, have successfully grown anything maybe beyond 2,000, 5,000 tons of salmon in a land-based aquaculture facility. The RAS systems are so complex that if one or two systems go down, you know, that's it, entire fish kill, you know, so a lot of waste of resources. So I thought maybe pick a series of geo-based areas of special interest. I think commercial interest needs to be there as well, and scientific interest, and deploy an array of sensors and cameras, and modeling and AI would be fantastic. This is a map of Ireland, so this is the mapping that's gone on in Ireland, and this is one of the bays there in the west of Ireland that has been mapped, and it's been mapped to a certain extent from a biodiversity perspective as well. So you follow the lines there. There are all the different types of biodiversity that's there, and to be able to do a lot more than just that in terms of predictions. And I thought, and forgive my pronunciation here, but Hardanger Fjord. I thought, as this fjord is the most, I think the heaviest in terms of aquaculture, that this would actually be a fantastic fjord to do this type of thing in. Would be, you know, setting up a whole range of sensors and that, and then, you know, being able to look at it from not only a pest perspective, but also a biodiversity perspective, quality of water perspective, you know, you've leisure, all of that kind of thing. I could be completely wrong, but I thought that might be a good area. And one of the things I thought I'd like to bring out as well actually was this, Gartner does this fantastic thing about all kinds of technology, and, you know, I mean, if anybody's been to any conferences this year, it's AI is just like, it's incredible. And now we've even got Nobel Prizes with AI, physics, I think, and chemistry as well. So, like, it's incredible. So there's a lot going on in AI, and I think AI will be able to do many great things, but you're going to need great data to do it. And you need to have great biologists, great mathematicians, great computer guys behind it, great software coders. You know, it's really multidisciplinary. But at the end of the day, it's the data sets really that's going to give you the best AI, really, at the end of the day, if you have a lot of data there. And that still means you know, your basic scientist, really, at the end of the day, in whatever discipline that you're actually in. So this talks about, you know, eventually there's going to be a trough of disillusionment, and eventually there's going to be some of these that come through, and you'll have your slope of enlightenment, and then finally your plateau of productivity coming out at the end of the day. And for me, AI, I love the thought of AI, and I love the thought of being in that decade of decision that we are in at the moment, and being able to make the right decisions, and being able to choose the right decisions, that AI has come at the right time for us, I think, to help us speed up our decision making, really, at the end of the day. I'm probably way too early in the talk, but yeah, about 10 minutes, okay. So I want to appeal to many of the scientists here who may feel that maybe research is no longer for them, and who want to translate their knowledge and their understanding of a particular topic area, and to act and to form a company. So trying to implore them to form a company that's going to make a difference. So I'm asking you to find your ikigai, basically. I know that many of you, you know, I think research is wonderful. I think it's fantastic in terms of the knowledge and the understanding that's there. But I do feel that it's an extraordinarily insecure world unless you're fortunate enough to have a tenured position in academia. And I've taken to this journey in terms of setting up my own company, and bringing on a co-founder. I had to convince a co-founder to come in as well, who had a complementary skill set to me, and then go out there and try and raise the funds to get the company going. We're now 4 people in the company, which is fantastic. By the end of this year, we hope to be 6, and then next year we will be 7, all going well with our investment raising side of things. But that's something that is very, very familiar to each and every researcher here present who has ever had to write a research grant. Okay, you still have to do the same sort of thing, but you have to pitch it in a different way to investors, of course. And we spoke earlier about language as well. When it comes to investment, it's a different language. So it's just another language we have to get used to. But, you know, if you've been involved in any multidisciplinary teams, and you guys here in the Centre for Digital Life Norway have, and you've been exposed to many different teams and many different universities and trying to get together and in terms of collaboration going forward, I think that this life can appeal to you too. So that's my appeal to you all, is to go ahead and maybe think about it. Think about forming a commercial entity. It needn't necessarily be a for-profit entity, but it needs to be something that is self-sustaining at the end of the day. Otherwise, there's no longevity there. And that's why companies need to make a profit, actually, you know, so they will be there tomorrow and the day after when those checks aren't coming in. Now, I do have a slide on that, actually, here somewhere, on different forms of enterprise as well. So lots of different forms of enterprise. You know, there's the normal, regular for-profit company. You know, that it's an organization basically that exists to earn a profit, but you can spend that profit how you like, as long as it's you have the governance behind it all. There's social enterprise, a business for social good that trades like any other business, but exists to specifically to make the world a better place, and any of the surplus is reinvested in that endeavor. And then cooperatives. It struck me that this type of environment here, where it's multidisciplinary, lots of science, lots of engineering here, is actually make a fantastic cooperative. And I don't know why there's not that many of those around there. You have it in lots of other things, for instance, in aquaculture, for instance, purchasing cooperatives. In agriculture, you have it in Ireland, there's so many different dairy cooperatives that are there, but you have cooperatives in terms of insurance, you have cooperatives in many, many different fields, but I haven't seen any that are science-led or engineering-led to date. I could be wrong, but that might be something I think that could go down really well here in Norway, actually. And if you're looking to the Centre for Digital Life Norway, maybe that's something that could come out of that, looking forward. And of course, there's loads of different variations on the above. But you do need a customer, and you need somebody who's going to pay for that. And whether that's government will pay for it, whether it's industry that's going to pay for it, or you know, other cooperatives. But you do need to have a customer at the end of the day. So you do need a problem that needs to be solved. And like, there's an incredible array of different types of business models out there. So that's kind of it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Margaret. Do we have 1 or 2 questions for Margaret while we get the panel set up?
I have a small comment about that. You mentioned Hardangerfjord as a test subject. It is actually in the making. There's 2 projects, one called Aquaphoenix, where they are actually catching feces and feet from the sea, from the cages, and see does it impact both the benthic and the water mass, because it's a word against word. We don't know how much. We have indications. And the other one is connecting all the environmental sensors in the fjord system with the multiple fish farms.
Excellent.
All talking to the
Very
same
good.
central core,
Very
incidentally
good.
called AquaCloud.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent.
Okay, thank you very much for this also very personal talk. Like a big fan of Ikigai. Okay. Just one question about the social, what was it like again?
Social enterprise?
Social enterprise, yeah. Can a social enterprise pay salary?
Yes.
Yeah?
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Social enterprise can trade like any other business, and of course pay salaries. Yeah. The only difference is that it will reinvest everything that it earns into making that difference.
Like a non-profit organization?
Yeah.
Is it different to a non-profit organization?
No, I get confused between for-profit and non-profit. I'm not sure if a social enterprise is non-profit because it needs to make a profit to reinvest it in the enterprise itself.
Okay, I think it's just a term or different translation or something.
Okay.
Sounds very similar. Thank you.
Okay.
Last question? Yep.
Just a bit on the feeding these aquacultures, no? That I got somewhere that many of these cultures are fed with other fish, and that because this fish is fish that is not eatable by humans, they don't enter into the statistics of the fish that is being fished in the seas, and that you need, of course, much more fish for one salmon. And what if you know something and can say something about this balance that these aquacultures might even under the table be causing much more fish?
Yeah.
Is it clear?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. Fish meal, there's fish meal out there, and fish meal is incorporated into it. But I guess from an aquaculture perspective, they've all been trying to find alternatives, and so that's why you'll find that there's soy protein actually in the feed, because they're trying to replace out that fish meal. And there's a huge number of different projects looking at different ways in which they can become more sustainable rather than just using fish itself. I know in the past, for instance, let's say the offcuts or the what would typically have ended up in a soup before ends up in the feed. But there are a lot of projects out there that are chasing a better way to make a more sustainable feed, for sure.
All fish stocks that we use are heavily documented.
Yeah.
So there are no ghost fish stocks that are being depleted. Every ton of fish meal that the fish farming industry buys is already rated by a supra-governmental or a or NGO organization. So there is no black pool of fish that's being killed off without extreme documentation. Yes.
It's almost 90% of the feed to the salmon is based on vegetables. Yeah, because it's considered not sustainable feed when you use other fish to feed. Yeah, white fish. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where do you want to stand?
Oh, right. Yeah, okay, all right. Okay.
Most important, you should be closer.
Okay, all right. Okay.
All right, everybody. I can stand here because I really look like this guy over here.
It's a sit no.
It's the
Ja,
opposite.
vi må stokke om.
Shall we change?
No, I think they can relate. They can correlate. If they can't correlate, we don't want them in the room. So, guys, welcome to this panel discussion. It's about blue AI. Is it useful in aquaculture and biodiversity? Terribly difficult word to say today. And how does this apply in the digital age that we are in? With me on the floor, we have Margaret Rae. We know her quite well already. Really, really nice talk you had. We have Ingeborg Myhr over there. She is Senior Vice President, Biotech and Circular Economy at NORCE. And then we have Marius Eidsaa, Computational Biology Researcher at SINTEF, Biotech and Nanomedicine. I already feel myself definitely the stupidest person on the stage. Well, that's a common feeling for me. And I am Björgólfur Hávarðsson. I am a master's in fisheries biology, and I've been working in aquaculture since in a different millennia, 1986. I've recently stepped into the role as a business developer in AquaCloud, which you saw flashed on your slide. I will be paying you for that. And my job there is to connect industry data with people who can develop ideas, concepts, and research based on that data. We today have 50% of the fish farmers in Norway pouring data on every day. That was the last promo I will be having on the stage today. I want to jump into the first question. We have had some very positive aspects, positive discussions. There was a little drop of skepticism about do evil by different databases. I'm not going to go that far into it, but I would like to address first what are the key challenges that actually hinder us both in transparency and open access, but in employing AI, as it were. I guess, Marius, I'll look at you for that.
Okay. Yes. I think some key challenges to this is that there are value in the data, and people know that there are value in the models, and they want to try to exploit this somehow. Which makes it very difficult for, say, startups and smaller enterprises, etc., to enter, kind of getting above the threshold, because you have this pursuit of value in the things that we need to drive this innovation. So I think that's one key challenge, that we need to lower this threshold somehow. We might get back to these models and the data later, but at least that's one point for me now. Yeah.
You have any thoughts on that? I guess you have.
Yes, I have some thoughts about that. Of course, you have the data of the ocean is of interest of many different groups today. In the north, I live in Tromsø. The ocean are important for geopolitical reasons. It's connected to the military and military surveillance and monitoring of a lot of different things. It's also data which is kind of maybe need to be disclosed, related to our oil installation, also our internet fiber. I think we have 2 lines that go from Norway to US, which is a kind of a huge challenge if it's cut. But for us in NORCE, we are doing a lot of research on environmental impacts. We have used to do it on related to oil industry, and now we have several projects related to aquaculture industry and different production systems. And a lack of transparency is maybe what we experience is a challenge to get data from the aquaculture industry. And of course, we are doing research on environmental impacts or fish health, which might be a kind of controversial or a kind of data you do not want out. But these are data which are valuable for us, because then we can combine this data with the data we are gathering, and by getting more data, you can say more. I can continue for 10 minutes.
I want to point at you, Margaret, now. How do we maintain the openness and the access? And how is it that stopped?
Yeah, I think it was said earlier in Nico's presentation and in the discussion as well. It's all about trust at the end of the day, because if you're going to share your data, you don't really want that data to come back and hit you with a big stick. So you want data. You certainly share data, but I think you need to incentivize it in some way, and I think you also need to do a lot of assurance. Reassuring people that it is not going to be used for purposes by which they may no longer exist as well. So I think that's really, really critical. Not so much the how do you trust the actual accuracy of the data, but how do you trust how it's going to be used in the future. And I think there's a lot of assurances that would need to be given that it will be used wisely and apolitically. Not that it would not be used for political purposes is another thing. And I think we live in an era right now where there's a lot of geopolitical tensions, and there are different kinds of elections going on and all over the world at the moment, and also that from a political perspective that it's just that it's going to be used to inform and for the science side of things, but it's not going to be used later in a way that could potentially hurt you really hard. And also from that regulatory perspective as well, making sure that and I think that needs to be really clear, and some kind of agreements on that before I think you could get that kind of data shared. Yeah.
Nobody wants to drive with a police officer in the back seat.
No.
Yes. Just to provide some perspective as well, because let's say in Japan, for instance, they are looking now at these copyright rules for generative AI, and I think it seems like they will actually just waive the whole thing and say that if people use Japanese data for making generative AI, we won't call it infringement on copyright. So I mean, different. I'm just throwing it in here because we've all talked in our kind of Eurocentric way of thinking, but other parts of the world think quite differently. And also the big thing that threw the whole generative AI thing into focus, ChatGPT, trained on a lot of data that has copyright, but people don't care about it. So I'm just saying it's, in a way, we're talking about the importance of keeping this, but maybe the competition and the leaders that are bringing the field forward don't care that much.
The pragmatists.
I'm not saying that we should think like this, but
there's a deeply pragmatic perspective here.
I just want to bring up another aspect of this transparency. And it's a kind of, if you're going to work with AI from aquaculture or from biodiversity in the ocean, today it's a kind of lack of transparency into the models we have. It's a kind of, what are the questions, what are the data going in there? Because they will, as it is to know, also affect, for example, decisions related to fish health or conservation purposes and so on. And this is actually hinting a bit to the competence and interdisciplinarity. It's a kind of, and also this kind of explanation, easy understanding AI, because as I said today, it's a black box. It's something, we put something in and it comes something out and we are not sure. So this is also a kind of a lack of transparency, more kind of a philosophy of science question maybe, but
A lot of data and quite a lot of the models out there are bound with some kind of IPR or non-disclosure agreements. How do they impact? I want to go back to you because this is something we discussed actually at lunch.
How
does it impact us? Can we waive them in some way? Should we?
I think this is very much connected to all kind of collaboration with industry. And it's based on trust and also this kind of how are you going to use it. Usually in contracts you make an agreement that you're going to publish this later on. I'm not sure how to solve it. It might be that we maybe need, as a researcher, to explain that the more data we have, because this is biology, it's a kind of is fish health, it's biodiversity and so on, and environmental condition, your more data you have, your more predictable models you will have, that this will be a benefit for all of us. And it's a kind of, if we are working as your company and so on, something like it can be that it's difficult, that it's not easy to, for example, go back and identify that this data comes from this facility or this company or something like that. So we have kind of a non-disclosure within the data, but not that will help us to get the data.
A certain blindness towards the source.
Yeah, it's a bit like the health discussion about the anonymous and the protection of the data.
Quite important.
Yeah, that was my point also, that Nico talked about this earlier, this idea of having some sort of blockchain or something for provenance of the data, and then I think that's a good idea. And also this use of federated learning. I'm not sure if people are aware of it, but where you kind of you gather your data and you agree on ways on how you want to model it, and then you make your models locally, but you combine the models, so it's kind of the data is obscured, but the insights from the data can be combined, and I like that idea also.
Look, do you have any?
The only thing I would say is, with my commercial hat on, is investors want to be sure that you're going to maximize the return on the investment. And I think, when it comes to sharing data and that whole value creation that comes out of that, they may be more in favor of it if there is a value creation for them also. So whether that's understanding their own operations and the values and the savings that may come from that, or whether there is actually an incentive to share that data at the end of the day. There's also the other side of it, the concerns, that they would have in terms of it coming back to haunt them later as well. So, again, just the whole kind of reassurance around that, that side of things. So value creation and incentivization, and then concerns in terms of the sharing of that data, that it doesn't haunt them many years later.
And mind you, the business hat is something we need to have on as well. We need to pay our bills in the end of the day.
Yeah.
I think we are sort of emptying. I know we are not, but we are coming to a certain point where we need to move on. But I want to allow 2 questions from the room, if there are any. Otherwise, we'll just move straight on. So is there anybody who want to comment or ask something related to key challenges that hinder transparency or hinder open access? I will hear you now. There you go. And please ask them. Don't ask me. I have no idea.
So there's a lot of industries in Norway, from our perspective, that is interested in the ocean. There's the wind, there's the cables that run along the bottom of the sea, it's the aquaculture, it's the oil industry. And of course, in terms of oil and gas development, Norway was very early on, very active from the governmental side. Do we have any advantages or ability to say that this is data collected on Norwegian, I would say soil, but in Norwegian waters, that also actually makes it more or less difficult to access this data as something that is of national value? If you know what I mean.
Can I start with an association, which I'm not quite sure is true? So please correct me if I'm wrong. But I spoke to people in aquaculture, and they said that these reports they need for assessing what's it, concession
License.
Yeah, license. The report is kept secret or not for public, but so they can sell it multiple times to multiple people. But the data never becomes publicly available either, which is, I mean, that's some place where you could start if this is true, that the work that people are already doing in evaluating whether or not some fish farm should be allowed to be one place, and they've done the biodiversity assessment, they've done all the measurements, but yeah, I think it's kind of strange that data is not publicly available. If true, I would need to recheck that.
It is
that's what I've
available
heard.
through Barents Watch.
Yeah. Yeah. That was my comment. But there's also becoming more and more requirement to sustainability reports, because all companies have to produce a report showing the sustainability. So that's also a source for data. But it's a kind of a bit old maybe, and yeah.
Oh, sorry, just a very
really fast.
really fast. A note on that for AI. I mean, when we get better at using large language models and understanding how these things communicate, we can use these reports as to increase our knowledge.
Sure.
Yeah. So we can actually get something from them.
And now you.
Thank you. So my name is Jon Olav Vik, and I am a professor at Norwegian University of Life Sciences, and I led one of the first digital life projects, which was called the Digital Salmon. And I think I am the Norwegian champion in getting projects delayed.
Oh, yeah.
I've been doing this for a long time. And one of the really big conceptual and diplomatic and cultural hurdles to achieving this kind of thing has been our ability to trade with models and with data.
Yeah.
So that people would know what they were buying, people would know what they were actually selling. And the one great example I've used to have is AquaCloud, where lots of fish farmers agree that they will pool their data because their data becomes more valuable in light of everybody's data. And it also is about something they are required by regulations to document and to demonstrate that they do something about, and it builds the reputation of the entire industry. I would like to hear the rest of you. What are your best examples of role models for doing business with models and data?
Maybe I could, from the research side, it's a kind of, we have some green platform projects where we have digitalization and digital twin as a kind of one of the things we are going to deliver. It's connected to kind of low trophic aquaculture, and we also have one on offshore aquaculture. And then it was kind of an agreement when we wrote the application, and it was also kind of agreed that we will get the money, but it's based on strong collaboration with the industry. So, but I guess that the people from more industry side have other examples.
I'm not so much maybe from the industry side, but certainly from for instance, the Marine Institute. So the Marine Institute in Ireland is the Irish state agency for marine research, technology, development and innovation. And they were asked, along with the Geological Survey of Ireland, to do that great mapping of the exclusive economic zone. I believe at the beginning of its life it was to find oil and gas, but it has found other uses since. But that data is entirely open to the entire world, and industry can use that data free of charge, basically, to develop in their various different industries. So it was basically an incentive, really used as an incentive to try to get industries located, in the ocean, that type of thing. And similarly, things like the underwater cables connecting us to the US, similarly, are not made available. Nobody really knows where they are. We have found certain ships from certain countries trying to find them and locating over them, which would be of concern for Ireland. We don't have a huge navy, so to be able to protect those resources, it's very, very difficult. But yes, sharing of that data in order to incentivize creation of industry, creation of other kind of activities, for sure.
Yeah, at least when it comes to data, I think this kind of data brokerage in a way will emerge, because people would want to have good data, relevant data, and then they can go to this kind of data broker and get, can you point me in the direction, you have the infrastructure, etc. And we have a few examples. We have, for instance, a partner in a project I'm in called Biodiscovery, where they have clients that are looking for specific enzymes, for instance, and they have bioprospecting expertise and lots of data, so they can point them in the right direction. So that's their business model.
Maybe some of those are time limited as well, in terms of exclusivity, that you have a certain amount of time in order to make use of the data. If you don't, then you're no longer exclusive.
And use.
Yeah. I actually go further. I'm recalling some things as well in terms of seabed mapping with the International Hydrographic Office in, I think they're located in Monaco. And they have appealed to everyone who has a vessel and has sonar equipment on it to share that data in an effort to map as much of the underwater world as possible. So now that data, I don't know whether all of that data is quality checked or not at the end of the day, but that is a huge initiative from anyone who owns any kind of a boat and has any kind of sonar system on it. All the way to the largest vessels, the ferries. They also have a lot of ferries involved, and the ocean cruisers as well involved in trying to map the underwater world, basically. And that's been going really, really well. I think it's called Seabed 2030 as a global initiative.
I think Jon Olav has gotten a very good answer to his question. So I think we'll move on to the next subject. I have 12 other questions to cover. I want to address, now we have discussed a little bit about hindrances and use and transparency. I want to address again a human component called mindset, our way and our culture towards technology. And I want to formulate a question discussing how important is mindset to adoption of AI technologies. How can industries ensure that they are using AI in a genuine way and driving progress and not just ticking off some regulatory boxes?
Okay, well, for Conry Innovation, we're using machine vision, machine learning, and AI. But that's the raison d'etre for the company, or let's say our key selling point at the end of the day, so that we are able to sell our technology onto salmon producers. So it needs to be accurate. It needs to make sense. It needs to be 100% foolproof, and it cannot be telling lies, basically, to the salmon producer at the end of the day. So it's our customer, really, I guess, at the end of the day, that and the uptake from them that dictates that. Also, another part of it is it'll always be the let's say the tech savvy company, or the companies that really, they like to try things out. Those are the companies that are probably the first that will try this, for first mover advantage at the end of the day. So there's always going to be some that are ahead of the rest. And once those companies actually see the benefit, and that benefit can be seen by others, you'll then get the rest, the vast majority of the cohorts coming forward then to implement the same technology, really, at the end of the day. So I think it's to answer your question, would be to target those companies that really like to try things out. They like to be the innovators in the space.
Yeah, the curious ones.
The curious ones, yeah, exactly. I'm not sure exactly if I've gone off in a tangent there or not.
There are
but
only tangents.
From that kind of
mindset. Marius first.
Yeah, sure.
The mindset.
Mindset, yes. On that, yes, thanks. I got it this time. Mindset. So I think it could be two different things here that is relevant to say. One is that there may be like fear or inherent resistance to change, and particularly with something that seems so unknown or kind of intimidating as AI can do sometimes. So that's the one, and then I think it's the other one is with a lot of when there's a lot of hype and buzz around the term, people want to adopt it, right? It's kind of one of the things that you need to you just have to like a box. You want, in order to be marketable, you need to tick the box. So maybe some businesses should ask, why should they use AI? I mean, do they need it, and for what? Maybe it's not what they think they need it for. Maybe it's different in different parts of the company. And I think maybe having both a top-down and a bottom-up way of thinking there, so that even the leadership, the C-levels, and middle management, and the workers, that they can both kind of meet on the same place and try to find what would we actually benefit from by adopting AI in our company.
Yeah, I think it's right. A lot of companies jump just to jump, and then find out while they're falling down towards a goal, maybe. Yeah. What do you think about that aspect?
I thought it was a bit funny when you were mentioning this tick-off box. If you apply to the Research Council in a lot of different calls now, you have to include some machine learning or something like that. But I think the aquaculture industry are very interested in AI, because they see, of course, every ton they produce with salmon or blue shells or whatever is dependent on that you have the best possible means to provide and earn as most money as possible. And also it's a kind of Now it's all this discussion about these new production systems moving offshore, deep sea. It's a kind of all this from RAS and also this now to keep the sea lice down, that you should have the salmon on the smolt as long as possible on land before you move it. So it's so many parameters to produce salmon or whatever seafood today. So I think they see this as a solution. But it might be a challenge for the small companies compared to the big ones when it's compared to adapt the methods.
That I have experienced for myself multiple times. And it's actually, what I was thinking when you were talking is that there is actually the mindset is sort of springs out of need must.
Yeah.
If you want to understand what you're doing, have a situational awareness, you need to have that awareness through data and analysis.
Yeah.
And it strikes me that perhaps companies would prefer initially to do consultation outside to see, okay, what potentially can be the benefit. But then at that particular point in time, they will probably prefer to hire into the company then at that stage, the skill sets to do that rather than necessarily, have that farmed out as well. Really depends.
It is really difficult to get your hands on those, those brains you need. I want to chase a tangent, obviously. That's what we do here. Now we looked at the Norwegian salmon farming industry. I want to go supranational, EU. Very fond of regulation. Some of those regulations, like now the charging port on my new iPhone is actually C, and I don't need any new leads, I hope, for a couple of years. Now I only have to change out all the others I have. That the regulatory culture in Europe, how does that impact AI, which is chasing like a race car? Jump in with ideas. I'm not going to rule you here.
I know the AI Act, there's a European directive now out on AI, but that's at let's say at a senior commission level, and they had folk bringing that together. But I feel that regulatory agencies that are out there may not necessarily have the skill set themselves, and I think that they themselves will be the blocker actually. Because of fear, one thing, but not being trained. They don't have the right staff, to be able to do stuff. For instance, in Ireland, we've had 20-year delays just in terms of getting licenses from the regulatory authorities for aquaculture. I cannot imagine how they will react to using AI. It just seems really radical, too much too soon, the kind of gradual kind of thing. I think that perhaps a lot of regulatory agencies are used of is this gradual increase, as opposed to tomorrow, let's try something, and for that, I think that they will need support to upskill themselves and bring in the right talent to help them do that. Sorry.
We need to vote some people out and vote some new people in just to get that flow through at top.
Get the flow, But it's that understanding. I think it's the fear that they don't understand, or they can't understand.
Or more comment.
Yeah, sure. Bring it on.
So I actually think like the AI directive is very interesting in terms of discussion, because a lot of things that are brought to attention from lobby organizations, NGOs, and so on towards this process, towards the AI directive, are actually issues that have been arising much earlier, even before we started talking about AI. But the fact that we are talking about it again in the context of AI means that they have not been solved and they have not been properly addressed. But we have to be I think we have to be very vocal in this discussion to point that out, that this is not an AI-related problem, but it's actually a general problem that hasn't been addressed earlier, and we will arise, of course, with much more force again in a more accelerated environment with AI, but it's not a AI-only problem.
Yes. Yeah, that's true.
On that note, it kind of covers this as well, but the AI Act, one thing that I like about it is that they define it as an AI needs to have a purpose, so they kind of give it the human element behind it. There should be kind of a purpose to the technology, and then you assess it based on risk. And I guess that can also apply to other types of similar digital technologies in a way. But I like it. It's simple that way. So I'm. Even though I do really think, and I mean there is evidence for it, that these regulations makes it harder, particularly for small enterprises and for innovation. I do think we should. We should have regulations. And then I came across this funny idea. How about using AI to automate the the kind of that you kind of have. You have you're a small enterprise. You just. These are my documents. Am I following the regulations? And it says, yes, you are. I think that's a kind of a nice way of using AI on its head for doing something that could potentially be both ethically okay and useful.
I'll take one comment from you, and then we have one from the room.
Yes. It's as it is of today. It's a kind of what you were pointing out. There's no guidelines for aquaculture. There's no guidelines for biodiversity in the ocean. And one of the challenges is, of course, how do these RE Act interfere with environmental acts and all these different acts that are around this, which needs to also to be identified. And in Europe, we also have this GDPR, who also affect the data, the protection of the data that comes into this. So it's a kind of we need an AI tool to find out of
the origins.
Yeah,
I think it costs like 30% more to establish these things because of GDPR. It's expensive.
I see that we're already finding new ways to use AI.
Yeah.
So I'm here with a nice question, maybe to Margaret, because you said that there are some delays in getting licenses because of the regulatory authorities.
Yes.
Could you give some examples? Do they give a reasoning as to why it's delayed?
I guess it's look. There's always a certain element of understaffing involved, of course, but I think there's no real decision maker. And I think that is the real delay behind it all. In that, at least in Ireland, there's, I think, 14 different organisations have responsibility for some aspects of the marine, and yet there's no one agency. Well, I tell a lie actually, because the agency has just been stood up. I think in the last 6 months or so, the Marine Regulatory Agency has actually been stood up, as in it has actually they've started to hire into it. And so we should have some decisions shortly. And it also goes to the responsibility you spoke about earlier, actually. When I think about medicines, there's the qualified person is the person who released the medicines, but that person is criminally responsible for that. And then you have the responsible person in hospitals who must also sign off, in any tissues or transplantations or any of that type of thing. And I'm not quite sure if they're criminally responsible. But now you also have the anti-money laundering side of things, and now the CEOs of banks are criminally responsible if they haven't implemented in the whole structure of the banking system a way to trace and to make sure that they're not laundering money illegally. And in the similar kind of way, I know I'm going off tangent here now, but I think that you need to have somebody who really understands the AI, the implications of the AI in any one agency to be able to sign, to a certain extent, off on that. You can't have somebody who doesn't understand the entire process or the implications of anything signing off on that. You need to have a responsible officer in organizations to be able to do that. I know I've gone way off tangent, I think.
And maybe the risk then becomes too high
For
change.
As the head of the company applying for the license, wouldn't you be the most responsible for signing off on that?
Sorry, say that again?
As a head of a company applying for that license, wouldn't you take the responsibility for signing off on that?
Oh, yes, so for pushing it through, yes. But once it gets, for instance, into the regulatory agency, it's there's a decision that you hope will come through out of the regulatory agency. But if it's stalled within the regulatory agency for 20 years, it gets really particularly frustrating for that for the industry, for everybody in the industry, that they're all stalled for so long and no decisions are made. That's a very tough environment to be in, and might explain also why we're at 0.1% of global production.
I know of Norwegian licenses that have been 7 years in the dialogue between company, legal, government, somebody else protesting. So that is. I don't think we'll find time for the rest of the questions, the 10 questions we haven't covered. Neither did I expect. So we have been flashed 10 minutes here. So I want to end this really interesting, meandering discussion with having the three of you give the room a piece of your mind. Tell them something interesting or something that's really on your mind or on your heart. That can be a little bit of a takeaway from you personally as specialists and professionals in the field, in many fields. I'll give you a minute-ish. So I'll start with you, Anna, then you, Margaret, and Marius. And I hope that what we will be talking, or they will be telling you here, is something that you can take away with you or even discuss afterwards over dinner, at the bar later tonight, debating heavily. I'm looking forward to that. So please, Anna.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, in 1 minute, responsible use of AI, both in aquaculture and when it comes to the biodiversity. We need to increase the sustainability of today's aquaculture practice, especially when it comes to salmon. It's too many fish who dies. So it's something about that we need better tools to understand the feeding. We need a better tool to understand the kind of how all these different pathogens implicate on each other, how they might be kind of stopped early depending on pH or oxygen level, to put all this kind of data together to give better prediction models. And of course, openness and transparency, I think it's incredibly important, because we are dealing, as I said, with living organisms, we're living with environmental conditions. And also this kind of future we have, like Margaret was saying in her beginning about climate change and the challenge we are front, to combine this data with data connected to climate change. You show a picture of an aquaculture facility in a fjord, to combine the data with the future flood, avalanches, rise of temperature level algae, and find the best places in the future to have aquaculture. So I guess I used more than 1 minute. I will talk more in the bar at 9 o'clock.
A really, really good point there.
Yeah.
I guess I looked at one of the questions here on benefits and risks that I foresee with AI, and I guess one of the things I would see with AI is, you really need to understand what's there. Otherwise, you risk being misled and making terrible decisions. That the insights are not very genuine. I do feel that where as you quite rightly pointed out, there needs to be an objective to using it. Why do you want to use it? And for those that really know that space and want to make somewhat faster decisions and things, it will be a competitive advantage for them. But these are people who really know why they're using it in the first place. And for me, even on this whole sustainability side of things, it's that kind of faster decision making. It's really important in this decade that we're living in right now, because this is the decade where we can make, it's either now or never, basically. This is the decade where we do need to take action. And I think AI has come at a good time for us in order to help speed up our decision making. Okay, that's me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Marius?
I think I want to go full circle with the ikigai thing. And my background is in physics. And I started doing computational biology because I thought it was sort of messy with biology, and it would be nice to get some order in the complexity. And in a way, when you have the whole ocean, it's even more complex. And even though it's really difficult to envision how all of these types of data and all of these systems will be coupled together, I think we should dare to envision ways of doing that, because if we look at it holistically, that's the type of use we can actually do some good with, because then we can predict, maybe we can find, let's say, synergies between aquaculture sites and let's say some cod feeding ground or something like this, and we can maybe we can set aside this small island because that's where the cod rears its young. It's not rearing its young. That's where the small cod are living, and then we can the next year we can protect another island. If we understand the whole system as a whole system, we can actually take the right decisions. And that's
social.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
The climate.
Exactly.
It's a kind, or this kind of conflicts with coastal planning and people.
So then we can actually make the right decisions, and really, I think that's the whole.
Really good points. We could indeed continue for a week, I guess. I'm gonna sum up this discussion just a little bit so that we have a red thread to take with us when we leave this room. As we have explored today, I think we can agree that AI holds incredible potential to transform industries, particularly in areas like biodiversity monitoring, which is something that is incredibly important. Aquaculture and sustainability work all tied together. However, this transformation hinges on overcoming challenges related to intellectual property, regulations, and general mindset. For industries to truly benefit from AI, it is essential to foster a mindset focused on progress and on innovation, rather than simply meeting regulatory requirements like we discussed a little bit earlier, we meandered into. Europe is really strong, has a strong tradition on regulation, which offers both opportunities and risks. And balancing sustainability with competitiveness, I shouldn't have picked that word, is crucial, especially in our blue industries. Also other sectors which are adapting to climate change. While global leaders like China are ahead in certain AI developments, Europe still has the potential, I think, to leverage niche AI technologies that align with local applications and sustainability goals. AI's ability to process and integrate vast amount of data, whether in species identification, real-time monitoring, or climate adaptation, offers hope for managing complex ecosystems and supporting thriving industries. In particular, in particular, aquaculture stands to benefit from an AI-driven site selection, species health monitoring, and predictive modeling for future climate scenarios, a mindset of situational awareness. Ultimately, the success of AI will depend on data availability, people's competence, and a clear vision for sustainable development. Moving forward, collaboration between regulators, industries, and AI developers will be the key to unlocking AI's full potential for the benefit of both industry and biodiversity. And this text was entirely written by ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wow.
Panel and moderator, please accept some